Investing in Magic the Gathering cards, should you do it and why? Short answer, yes. And I think if you're watching this video, you know exactly why you're watching it. It can be very confusing at times to identify what is valuable, especially now that we spent the past couple years with nothing but these collector's items, special editions that are double the MSRP of some other product, and they offer you this extended art, shiny foil variant. Now, I've already voiced my opinion on this before. I don't like that one bit. If that's right up your alley, then good for you. I don't think because you call something a collector's item that it's going to be a collector's item. That's one of my biggest pet peeves, is whenever you explore the world of collectibles and you see something that says collector's item on it. If you have to call something a collector's item, it's sort of like calling everyone special. If everything is special, then nothing is. So that's kind of the trend that we're noticing with Magic the Gathering cards, is that the newer ones are labeled shiny, exclusive, secret layers. This is the only version of this artwork that you can find, so you gotta have it. It's super rare, it's super collectible. Is it? I don't even know if it's that desirable. But what I do know is that people want to find collectible Magic the Gathering cards. The collectible market for this game has been growing ever since the reserved list. So more time that has passed and people have been paying attention to the skyrocketing prices of cards that will never be reprinted, you start to get people who are investors in other collectibles interested in this game. Because it is, in ways, a lot like the stock market. We actually have a good resource that's literally called MTG Stocks. So while some people aren't a big fan of people buying out cards on the reserve list, treating this more like an investment rather than a game, it's now part of the secondary market, whether we like it or not. So how exactly should you invest in Magic the Gathering cards if you're looking to do that? It kind of goes back to what I just said. You have people who don't like this collectible market. They don't appreciate it when you have people who don't play the game that are just sitting on stacks and stacks of reserve list cards that'll never be reprinted just to see the value spike. This is what I would like to call playable value. You have something that's necessary for a meta, you have something that's necessary for a format like EDH, and people want it for their decks, they want to play with it. That is what gives something playable value. The problem with playable value is that it's sometimes extremely volatile, and this is most commonly seen in a format like Standard where cards rotate out. So you'll have a brand new card just out of the new set that's worth $50 because every deck wants it. It's in most of the decks in the top 8, but then a couple years later, it's gone, it's out of the format, and it doesn't have much of an impact in Eternal formats. Those are formats where you can play cards from throughout the entirety of Magic's history. So the price plummets. It's important to consider the playable value of cards because it can either set you up for victory or a massive loss. Like, we're talking, you could lose a lot of money if you're not paying attention to the current metas, if you're not paying attention to what decks are playing what. So you might have invested in a lot of expensive cards not knowing exactly what to do with them. To me, I don't think these are the best investments just because it requires more effort on your part. The more that you have to pay attention to the market, the more likely you are to make mistakes. So if you are willing to invest in something that has volatility, that could be $50 one day, but next year it could be maybe $5. You gotta know when to dump those cards. You gotta know when to sell them off. And an easy trick to remember when investing in anything is to buy low and sell high. Not every investment is a long-term investment. So you maybe won't hold on to a card for longer than a couple months. I just think for the people who are looking at the game and the collectible aspect of the game, you're not going to be as inclined to focus on where certain decks are finishing. You know, what is the value of this card for certain decks, because you don't play the game. If your primary focus is the collectability of the cards, I would stay away from them, personally. You do have playability value in other cards that are in Eternal formats, which I think is a little bit safer, but even then, I want something that is going to maintain its value. I want something that is not just expensive because it's trending. I want something that has been a solid performer and is going to be for the future. And we all know what I'm talking about. We're talking about reserve list cards, but not just any reserve list cards. We're talking about reserve list cards that combine the collectability factor and the playability factor. And right off the top of my head, the best cards that you can invest in, the dual lands. Any of them. You do have some like Volcanic Island, Underground Sea that see a little bit more play than the other ones, so that's why they might be a little bit more expensive, but you can't go wrong. These are necessary for every deck in Eternal formats. Whether you're playing Commander, whether you're playing Legacy or Vintage, or some other future format that does allow you to play cards from all the way back to Alpha. Because these are played in just about every deck, they're always sought after. People want them. And it doesn't matter so much about the condition or even the printing. It could be unlimited, it could be revised. We're not just talking about alpha and beta. Even the cheapest versions of most of these cards are still going to get you at least $500. And while they've had some spikes and dips, they do maintain their price and they're not likely to crash anytime soon. A lot of this, of course, is on the back of the reserve list. So long as we have the reserve list, these cards are likely going to keep going up indefinitely. This doesn't just apply to the dual lands. I mention them because to me they're the best options. Any kind of card that is incredibly sought after, but isn't for meta reasons, that isn't a trend, is usually a safe bet. We have other things like Gaia's Cradle, that's been an expensive card for a long time. Any kind of green deck that plays creatures, you're gonna want to look into one eventually. I mean, there are a ton of reserve list cards that are playable, but maybe not playable to the degree of the dual lands, that are still great options to invest in. Now, where I tend to deviate from this is when we talk about older cards that just have this premium placed on them because they're old and there's not that many of them. You look to sets like Arabian Nights, Legends, Antiquities, The Dark. You have cards that are reserve list, but they're just expensive because of that collectability. I'm looking at you, Jazam Jin. It doesn't really have a place in any competitive format. It was a good value card for the time. 5/5 for 4 mana. When not a lot of cards back then did anything crazy, that was actually pretty good. But it's on the reserve list. It's highly sought after for collectors because it is iconic, that artwork is iconic. However, it's just not playable. Like, nobody is going to look for Jazam Jin or any card that's similar to it. You could have another 4 mana 5/5 creature that does 1 damage to you during your upkeep, and it's going to be ignored. No one's going to care about it because that does absolutely nothing for strategies. I don't like investing in these cards personally because you don't have the playability factor. And if you've ever even casually paid attention to this game, you understand that Black Lotus is the holy grail. When it could fetch easily tens of thousands of dollars at an auction, you know it's at least desirable. However, it's not going to be commonly purchased on the market because most people don't have that much money to spend on one card. They don't have that much money to risk on one individual card. And the physical card itself is not really played either. You have vintage decks, of course, that play Black Lotus, but the majority of that is going to be through Magic Online. The actual card itself is probably never going to be sleeved and played in any event at the risk of damaging it. I prefer to stay away from those. They're not bad investments necessarily, but to me they're missing the playability factor. And that's what I think combines the best of both worlds, where you have the volatility, seeing the price change in the future, while also having the strength of the reserve list. So that's what I personally enjoy investing in, and this requires a lot of due diligence. You need to understand what is playable, what is seeing more play in a format that's very popular like EDH, and recognizing that competitive play is seeing an increase. So with that increase in play, something like Gilded Drake is now over $300. I remember feeling bad a few years ago when I bought it for $80. But it turned out to be a great investment because more competitive players started to recognize its value, its potential, and then it skyrocketed. So to me, that's the best way to invest in Magic the Gathering cards. It's the proper understanding of what is seeing play, but what is also likely to maintain its value. All of these exclusive printings, collector's items, masterpiece editions, they had some appeal back around Battle for Zendikar. Remember when you had those lands that were very difficult to find? You maybe got one in every other box, and even then you weren't guaranteed that it would be a good one, but still, the potential of getting a special edition Scalding Tarn at a time when Scalding Tarn was easily worth $80 from the first printing in Zendikar, I think was great. It was interesting at least. But now that they do that for every set, I cannot confidently recommend newer collector's editions. I can't confidently recommend the special edition promo card extended art variant of whatever new card is popular, because I just don't think they're going to hold their value. This happens with collectibles all the time. When the secondary market is strong, the publisher, the designer, the creators, they will try to assign value themselves, and it almost never works because the secondary market is filled with cards that are valuable because we, the consumer, said so. So that's going to do it for the video. Let me know what you think in the comment section below. Your opinion of investing in Magic the Gathering cards. Subscribe if you have not already. It really does help the channel. Void here signing off. I will see you all next time.